profile than the average person. And I think as far as they can measure it, not really. Like the population didn't appear to be that unusual. So I think, again, I'll post the entire article. But when it sort of starts out with, he shows up in the county, starts talking to people, and says, well, why are the healthcare expenditures here so high? And the first answers they give are sort of along those lines of like, we eat all this Tex-Mex food, and there's like an obesity problem, which is certainly the case. I mean, it's the case nationally. It's definitely the case in Texas, I can tell you. And so it was sort of a story about like, it's just a very risky population. But then when you actually looked at the statistics, I think it was like, it's true that the BMIs were higher, but actually like the smoking rates were lower than like many of the surrounding counties that had much lower expenditure rates. And just overall, it's not at all clear that it's not the case that the enrollees here are like consistently worse on all health dimensions than somebody just taken from the national average. Yep.
So, well, just by looking at these numbers, we can see that everything is constant. I think that there's a huge incentive to, as you say, already use this service.
Right.
Do you use a problem? Is that design policy problem, or is it implementation problem implementation?
Well, so I mean, so that's an interesting question. I think there's not, but in some sense it assumes there's actually a policy period. Like it's not, the policy environment here is not any different really than anywhere else in the country. So basically there's private hospitals, both for-profit and not-for-profit, and those hospitals treat patients who basically come in either with private health insurance or Medicare, or potentially with Medicaid. And the private insurance is just, that's whatever the private market sort of decides. Medicare does have specific policies on what gets reimbursed and how much and so forth, but those policies are basically uniform across the country. So it's not like McAllen is sort of facing a much different set of policies than anywhere else in the country. So like policy variation alone can't really explain why it is that it's so much higher.
So for these percentages, is it the case that sort of like the patients are requesting more of these analyses, or it's more like the doctors are?
Prescribed. Yes, I think that's always a very difficult question. It's like sort of hard to tell where like one begins and the other ends. So certainly I don't think that the patients are coming in and demanding that like I must have an echocardiograph. But I think it's probably some sort of like the doctor is offering it and encourages the patient to get it, but not to say you must get this, or I'm going to stop seeing you altogether. And they'll probably say, look, you might as well be safe, do this. It doesn't really cost you anything extra. It's like going to be a copayment at most or something like that. And so it's sort of neither one has much of an incentive not to do it, I guess.
What are the laws like about malpractice? Because like, it could be something like
right.
There's so much private practice here, the doctors feel like,
Yep. So that's a very good question, and actually in an article they also talk about that. That's actually, so the first thing they talk about is like, well, fat, and okay, well, it's not necessarily that. Okay. And then it's like, so he talks about doctors like, it's got to be malpractice, right? But then he sort of asks them, well, isn't it the case though that like Texas had actually had tort reform earlier in the decade that like made it actually pretty hard to sue the doctors for malpractice. And so he says, well, but I thought Texas was actually supposed to be sort of a case of like malpractice there aren't that many malpractice lawsuits anymore. And like one of the doctors was like, actually it's basically falling down to zero. So it doesn't seem like it's just sort of this defensive medicine of like, wow, I'm really afraid I'm going to get sued if I don't just do everything, like order every test that I possibly could.
So is it like cultural? Is it like the difference in America versus we have our unlimited plans on cell phones, we just call and text and like look up stuff like way more. And it's not because we're different, it's because like the cost of answer.
Yeah, so I think there's, he talks about that a little bit later in the sense of like, so basically he does think that there's something cultural about it, although it's not like the doctors here came from a different culture than the doctors in like I think El Paso is sort of the comparison area that he keeps on referring to. But it is the case that like they're not necessarily, in some cases I think, if I order this additional test then I get to keep some percent of it and that's good for me. But it's also the case that in some cases they've just been trained one way of like, you should keep this person in the hospital for 24 hours for observation versus like it's okay to send them home after 12 hours and just tell them to come back if something gets worse. And it's like clinically both of those possibilities are acceptable. One is obviously more costly, but physicians aren't trained to think about like, they're trained to think about like, well, what is the best clinical practice, not like what is sort of the most cost effective in terms of being effective, but not. So no, so Kaiser doesn't. So Kaiser is an example of basically they're an HMO. And so, yeah, so right, so the hospitals here they'll make more money if they keep you there for 24 hours. Yeah, right. So the thing that's funny is that he talks to all the hospital managers, and they themselves are actually surprised, seemingly genuinely, to learn these facts. Like they didn't realize they were actually like the second most expensive healthcare market in the United States. And usually it's always like, well, it must be somebody else. So he talks to like one of the hospital, the managers at like the cardiac hospital, and says she was certain the doctors performed surgery only when it was necessary. It had to be one of the other hospitals that was causing this. And I guess he talked to like a bunch of different groups of doctors, and they all kind of kept on bringing up this Renaissance Hospital, which is like a for-profit hospital. So then he went and talked to the CEO there, who was a former anesthesiologist. And this is just kind of amusing in the sense that the guy sort of gives this incoherent like diagnosis of what the problem is with healthcare in America, but not in McAllen, which is the actual place that he's trying to figure out what's going on. So the guy says, first of all, that government is a problem in healthcare. And if anything, Medicare doesn't pay enough, so he gets paid more by private insurance than he does by Medicare, which seemingly would contradict. So the question is, why are expenditures so high? You would think that that second point would then contradict the first one, because if the government is paying less, then A, the price is lower, and B, there's probably going to be less quantity just because the physicians are not going to want to provide as many procedures, they're not being paid as much. But never mind that. Then he says government programs are wasteful. Every person in this room can easily go through the expenditures of Medicare and Medicaid and see all kinds of waste. Although again, all Medicare is doing really, all of this stuff is provided by private hospitals. So Medicare is just reimbursing them at predefined rates. So at the end of the day, it's the physicians who are deciding whether or not to have a surgery or whether or not to do a procedure. Medicare's actual administrative costs are very, very low compared to a private insurer. But of course, not in McAllen. So the clinicians there are providing necessary essential healthcare. It's just in all these other much lower cost areas where Medicare is apparently wasting money. So basically, I think the takeaway is that the managers have no clue sort of why it is their expenditures are high. I mean, possibly either they're being disingenuous and sort of pretending not to know when they do know, but I don't know, it seemed like his impression was they were like genuinely surprised that they were way above, but they didn't really seem to have any idea why. Okay, so that's kind of like a very localized example of potentially the overall problem. But in terms of thinking about what sort of the treatment level, like what actually happens, why it is that we have these treatments that seemingly are at the same time both generating overall increases in average health and yet seem to not be all that cost effective on the margin. So I think it's very instructive to think about this one example, which is basically angioplasty. So So there's sort of three types of healthcare treatments you can think about. So one is a highly cost-effective innovation, and then the second one, so that's of course going to be, you're going to get a great return on that. The second one is something that's potentially cost-effective but has heterogeneity benefits. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And then third is sort of this technologies where we don't even know whether or not they work. But you don't even have to get into sort of this third category before you start running into cost-effectiveness problems, as we'll see. So this is just kind of an inversion of like the flat of curve graph. So now what we're graphing here is the marginal return to a treatment. So on the x-axis, x, you have like the number of treatments that are being done, and on the y-axis you have s prime of x. So s of x is like health outcome. So s prime of x is going to be the marginal return in terms of a health outcome to that treatment. And so as you do more treatments, the marginal productivity is falling. But when you have a technological innovation, you could think of basically shifting this curve out potentially, right? So it's like before these treatments didn't even exist, and then you invent them, and then maybe the whole curve shifts out. But in terms of like allocating the treatments or figuring out how many treatments you want to do, once you get past this point, or when it's shifted out at that point, you're getting into the territory where you have like a negative return, right? Because the cost at that point, which is constant, is greater than the marginal benefit. So if we think about that first type in the context of heart disease, aspirin is an example. So aspirin turns out to be an incredibly cost-effective treatment for heart disease. It basically costs nothing, and it actually works. So there have been randomized controlled trials. This was back in 1974, where they randomly assigned some people who had heart attacks or were at risk of heart attacks to take aspirin for a year, and then they randomly assigned other people to not do so, and they found significantly higher survival rates than the people who had been assigned aspirin. And so again, that costs nothing. You'd be crazy not to prescribe that immediately, basically, in those types of situations. But then, that's one treatment. Obviously, it's not going to fix everything, and so people are still getting heart attacks. So then you sort of start thinking about, well, what are the additional treatments that then cost more to do? So angioplasty is basically one of those treatments. And the way to think about angioplasty, so what it is you have a heart attack, and they go in with like a small catheter. They actually go into like your artery and go in. They can both use it for diagnostic purposes, so they can sort of try to figure out what's going on in there, and then they can actually have like a stent that they insert with it, where then they inflate the stent with a balloon. So the idea is your artery has become blocked and it's constricted. So they go in, they inflate the balloon that sort of blows it up to help unblock it, and then they leave the stent in there. So it's basically like they put a like wall inside your artery to help try to keep it open. And if you look at who's receiving that procedure, it turns out that there's sort of a very wide variation in the conditions under which people are getting this procedure. So there's some people who are going to get it immediately within 2 hours of having a heart attack. So AMI is acute myocardial infarction. That's just like a medical term for heart attack. And so those people make up only a small percentage of overall people. But the idea is, you have a heart attack, go to the hospital, they go in there, figure out what's going on, and put in a stent and so forth. Then another group of people are basically getting it about within the next 2 or 3 days. So the idea there is like you have a heart attack, you go into the hospital, they treat you, the symptoms subside, but then they sort of go in a couple days later, try to figure out what's going on there, and then maybe insert a stent. And then there's a whole other class of people who actually get it when they haven't even had a heart attack yet. So they have coronary disease, like they have plaque buildup and so forth, and so there's some risk of getting a heart attack, but they haven't actually had one yet. And so what they're doing is going in, kind of exploring around, and inserting the stent as like sort of a preventive measure. And it turns out that the benefits of doing this vary tremendously depending on where you are on this graph. I should also say though that the second thing that's plotted here is actually the distribution of what types of patients are getting the treatment. So the people who are getting it within 2 hours of having a heart attack are actually not a very large fraction of people. So you can see there's not very much probability mass here in the yellow curve. In fact, most of the probability mass is all the way up here in the sense that you're doing angioplasty on people who haven't actually had a heart attack yet, but may potentially have a heart attack at some point. And so if we look at the clinical evidence, it basically looks like the follows. So first, if you go back about 10 years ago, they're doing clinical trials on angioplasty. And I think in the US they had started to actually do angioplasty before the clinical trials had been done. So like for a drug, you need to do a clinical trial first, but for like a surgical procedure, you don't necessarily have to prove in a randomized control trial that it's effective. So basically, in the US, at a lot of hospitals, like you have a heart attack, they would go in, give you angioplasty. In Europe, though, where it's more like sort of evidence-based, they weren't really doing that yet. So they were just basically, if you had a heart attack in like France or something like that, you would go in, they would give you what's known here as fibrinolytic therapy, which is basically a clot-busting drug to try to like destroy whatever clot is blocking your artery, and then see how you do. And so it turns out, so they did an RCT comparing angioplasty within 2 hours of a heart attack against the clotbusters, and it turns out that in fact angioplasty was effective. It was giving a significant improvement for patients over just getting the clotbuster. So basically at that point in Europe they say, okay, well, this has been proven to be clinically effective, so now they're going to start doing angioplasty too. But the US, so this is like one example of like, the US was like spending more, adopting technology sooner, and in that sense we're actually sort of ahead of the curve relative to maybe many other countries in the world. So that's the good news. But the bad news is we don't stop there. So then we're like, okay, well, it works within 2 hours of getting a heart attack. So why don't we try doing it like 4 days after you get a heart attack? So then we're doing that, and so they did a randomized control trial comparing people who are getting angioplasty. So let's see, they're looking for what happens in the next 4 years after you have your heart attack. If you get angioplasty, I guess 3 to 28 days after having your heart attack. So it's like you have your heart attack, you survive, they go in and say, it's still looking kind of blocked in there. We're going to give you angioplasty. Turns out that has no statistically significant effect at all on your survival rate. But that doesn't stop us. So then we're like, well, let's go even further. And you haven't even had a heart attack yet, so we're just going to give you angioplasty because we see some risk factors. It doesn't look as good in there as we would like. So then they do an RCT, a randomized control trial of angioplasty as an initial management strategy for patients with stable coronary artery disease. And big surprise, it does not reduce the risk of death of myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack, or other major cardiovascular events when added to like the existing medical therapy. All right, so this again is showing, look, this doesn't do anything from a clinical perspective. And again, another trial shows that. So what we're getting here is probably what you think of as overuse in the sense that this is like sort of benefit, the marginal benefit line is the blue line, and so for the people who get it within 2 hours of having a heart attack, yes, there is there's a substantial marginal benefit, but the vast majority of people who are getting it are out in this like over 2 days or even they never even had a heart attack yet range, and for them there's basically no clinical benefit at all. And so this is basically a case where you have a treatment that, this is what I was talking about when I said there's a treatment that sort of has heterogeneous effects. So for some patients here, it is in fact very effective, but then for other patients, it's not effective. And the ironic thing here is that so angioplasty is relatively speaking not that invasive a procedure. They're just doing a very small hole and inserting this catheter into you. And it's actually that non-invasiveness that makes it so susceptible to overuse. So if you instead compare it to another procedure that's called a carotid endarterectomy, so what they do there is they find that, so if you're like carotid artery, which runs up your neck, they find that it has a lot of plaque buildup in it, what they can do is they can actually go in surgically and like open it up and try to remove the plaque and then sew it back up. And this is an artery, so this is a very risky surgery. There's a very non-trivial chance that you will simply die in the surgery itself. So you're only going to do it in extreme, like, cases where like the person is in really bad shape. It's not something you're going to do is just kind of like, oh, maybe at some point you'll have a problem, so let's just go in and do this. And so if you sort of look at the marginal benefit there, but that treatment's going to quickly fall down to be zero. Actually, it'll quickly fall down to be below zero because you're actually putting people at very serious risk for doing this. So when you do that, and you have a treatment like that, you kind of, there's a limit to how much you can overuse it because it simply isn't that applicable or it's not that safe to do in most cases. Whereas when you have a very sort of non-invasive treatment like angioplasty, you can kind of, sky's the limit. You can just keep on prescribing as long as you think there's any benefit at all, even if it's been shown scientifically to not have benefits. Okay, so that's I think sort of a very specific case example, and I'll sort of talk about some other factors when we come back. I guess Wednesday, because Monday we have a holiday.